A blood-covered retired police dog stormed into the station during a snowstorm. What was strapped to his back left every officer speechless. No one knew what had happened in the blizzard that night, until the front door of the sheriff's station burst open and a battered, bleeding dog appeared, carrying a crying infant in a torn baby sling. Behind his weary eyes lay a chilling secret, and a story no one could have predicted. The wind was howling down from the Rockies like a pack of wolves, gnawing at every shutter, whistling through every crack in the worn-down siding of the trailer homes on the outskirts of Pine Bluff, Montana. By 10 p.m., the town was cloaked in white, visibility barely stretching past the tips of your boots, and the temperature had plunged well below zero. Sarah Whitman stood on the front steps of her tiny trailer, shoveling snow with gloved hands that were already losing feeling. She paused every minute or two to check the baby monitor she'd clipped to her jacket, the small screen glowing faintly in the storm. "Just another 10 minutes," she whispered to herself, her breath curling into the air. "Get the walkway clear for the ambulance if Harper spikes another fever." Inside, Harper, her 10-month-old baby girl, slept wrapped in 2 fleece blankets, a tiny knitted cap pulled down over her ears. Her small chest rose and fell steadily, the only calm in a night gone violently cold. The power had gone out 20 minutes earlier. No heat. No lights. Just the hum of the baby monitor, still somehow clinging to life. Sarah hadn't even noticed the cracking sound at first. Not until it was too late. A monstrous groan echoed from the woods behind the trailer. She turned her head just in time to see the silhouette of the massive pine tree come crashing down through the snow-filled darkness. It snapped through the roof like a fist through paper. The next second was an explosion, wood splinters, shattered glass, flames. "Harper!" Sarah screamed. She didn't feel the splinters of glass slice across her cheek or the shards of metal tear through her jacket. She only knew that she had to get inside. Had to get to her baby. She bolted toward the trailer, but the porch had collapsed. The structure was engulfed in orange light, fire crackling from the fallen wires. She tried to push forward, but the heat drove her back. The wind had fed the flames like kindling, and they rose fast. Too fast. "God, please! Harper!" Then a blur. A streak of tan and black. Ranger. The old German shepherd from next door, the one that everyone said was too old, too broken to matter anymore. He dove through the snowbank like it was nothing, slammed through the collapsed side of the trailer, disappearing into the fire and smoke. "Ranger, no!" Sarah cried, sobbing, scrambling through the snow on her knees, but he didn't turn back. Seconds passed. 5, 10, 30. Sarah screamed and beat at the snow. She tried to rise, but her knees buckled, her world tipping sideways. The heat, the pain, the smoke, it all blurred together as she collapsed in the snow. And then, from the whiteout, came a shape. The dog, blood-soaked, his coat matted with something dark and sticky. Clenched in his jaw was the frayed strap of a torn baby carrier. Inside, Harper lay cradled against Ranger's chest, still wrapped in her blanket, face blackened by smoke, but moving. Ranger limped toward Sarah, then past her. He didn't stop. He kept walking, toward the road, toward the town, toward the only place he remembered from before his retirement. Sheriff Luke Garvey leaned back in his old wooden chair, the crackling police scanner filling the silence with static and half-heard voices. The storm had taken down most of the cell towers, and all the roads out were closed. He rubbed at his temples. The old scar on his shoulder throbbed with the weather, a souvenir from Nam. He took a sip of his coffee, lukewarm and bitter. "Anything?" Deputy Carla Monroe asked, walking in with snowflakes still clinging to her jacket. "Quiet night." "Blizzard like this usually keeps the drunks inside," Luke muttered. That was when the front door slammed open. The wind roared in behind the figure. Both officers jumped up, hands on their holsters. Ranger stood in the doorway, soaked in blood. Eyes wild, chest heaving, and on his back in a sling of burned fabric. A baby. Barely breathing, crying, alive. Luke blinked, his breath caught, the years rolled back. He knew that dog. Even through the blood and the frostbite, he knew those eyes. "Ranger," he whispered. The dog staggered forward, then collapsed at Luke's boots. The baby gave a broken, wheezing sob. Carla dropped to her knees. "Jesus, that's a baby." Luke reached down, trembling, and peeled back the soot-covered blanket. 10 tiny fingers, a singed pacifier still clutched in her mouth. A bracelet on her wrist. Harper Whitman. The room fell into stunned silence. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, a new storm had just begun. Carla Monroe was already reaching for her radio. "Dispatch, this is Monroe. Get me Dr. Halbert at County General now. We've got a live infant in possible respiratory distress and—" She paused, swallowing hard. "And a dog. German Shepherd. Looks like he's bleeding badly." Luke, still kneeling beside Ranger, gently lifted the baby into his arms. The child whimpered, eyelids fluttering, alive, barely. The old sheriff's voice cracked as he spoke. "Get the med kit from the back room, now." Carla disappeared like a shot, boots clomping across the wooden floor. Luke turned his attention back to the dog. "You old fool," he murmured, pressing his hand against the worst of Ranger's wounds, gashes along the flank, bite marks, maybe even a knife wound. "You did good. Real damn good." The dog's eyes flickered just enough to find Harper's tiny hand as it clung to Luke's sleeve. A sound, more a breath than a bark, escaped his throat before he laid his head on the cold tile floor and went still. Not dead. Just unconscious. "Stay with me, buddy," Luke whispered. Carla returned with the med kit and a blanket, eyes wide as she saw the pool of blood spreading beneath the dog. "We need to get both of them to the hospital." "Now!" "I'll drive," Luke said, standing with Harper in his arms. "You carry him." Carla hesitated. "Sir, we don't even know what happened." "He didn't do this," Luke snapped. "You hear me? Look at the baby. She's got singe marks. Smoke damage. Someone's house is gone, and this dog carried her through a blizzard to get here. Don't you dare treat him like a suspect." Carla bit her lip, then nodded. She gently knelt beside Ranger and slid her arms beneath his body. "He's heavier than he looks." "He's always been like that," Luke said softly, a flicker of memory in his eyes. They moved as fast as the storm would allow, headlights barely cutting through the whiteout as the patrol truck bounced down the snow-covered road. Inside the truck, Luke kept a hand on Harper's chest, feeling the tiny rise and fall beneath his palm. "Just hang on, sweetheart," he whispered. "We're almost there." The hospital glowed like a beacon in the storm, small, 2 stories but warm, lit by backup generators. Dr. Jim Halbert met them at the entrance, still in jeans and a thermal, stethoscope bouncing as he jogged out into the snow. "What the hell?" "No time," Luke barked. "Baby's breathing but shallow, and the dog needs a transfusion or he's gone in minutes." "Get them both inside," Jim waved them through. "Room 3? Carla, go wake the techs!" They burst through the emergency doors, chaos spinning to life. Nurses scrambled, heat rushed over them like a wave. Luke gently laid Harper down on the examination table, letting the warmth begin to work on her tiny fingers and lips. Dr. Halbert checked vitals, barked orders, cleared her airway, and inserted oxygen within seconds. "She's stable, barely," he said. "We'll need to monitor her overnight, probably smoke inhalation and early hypothermia. But she's alive." Luke's knees buckled slightly as he exhaled. Ranger was still unconscious in the next room, a nurse pressing gauze to his side. Carla returned, her hands shaking as she held out something wrapped in plastic. "We found this tangled in the carrier strap." Luke took it. It was a charred photo, half burned, but he recognized the face instantly. Sarah Whitman. "Jesus," Luke breathed. "That's her baby." "She's not at the hospital," Carla said, voice tight. "No ambulance runs from her part of town. Fire crews can't get in. Roads are blocked." Luke's mind began to turn like it hadn't in years. "Then she's either still out there, or worse," Carla said grimly. Outside, the snow fell like ash over the town of Pine Bluff, but inside the hospital, a baby slept safely. A dog lay bleeding but not broken, and a mystery had just begun. The hospital lights flickered briefly, a reminder that the backup generator was running on overtime. Sheriff Luke Garvey leaned against the wall of room 3, his arms crossed tight across his chest, eyes fixed on the small bundle in the bassinet. Harper slept, her cheeks blotched red from exposure, a tiny bandage across her temple where broken glass had left a shallow cut. "She's lucky," Dr. Halberd murmured, walking up beside him. "A few more minutes in that cold, and—" He didn't finish. Luke didn't need him to. "She didn't cry when I picked her up," Luke whispered. "Not really. She just stared." Jim Halberd exhaled through his nose. "Babies do that sometimes in shock. But she's stable now." "That dog of yours bought her time." Luke's eyes narrowed. "Not my dog." Jim raised an eyebrow. "Could have fooled me." A nurse knocked gently. "Sheriff, there's someone outside asking for you." Luke frowned. "Who?" The nurse looked confused. "Didn't give a name. Said you'd remember him." Luke walked into the waiting area, where a tall man stood with snow melting from his shoulders. Military haircut, hard eyes, and a fatigue jacket 2 sizes too big. It took Luke 3 seconds. "Sam Whitman." "Sheriff." They shook hands. The grip was firm. "Familiar." "I heard it on the radio," Sam said. "Dog?" "Baby, my niece." His voice cracked slightly. "That's Harper, right?" Luke nodded. "She's alive, in rough shape, but she's a fighter." Sam's jaw tightened. "Where's my sister?" "We don't know yet." "Her trailer was hit. Tree came down in the storm. Fire." "Nobody's made it back there." Sam closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, he looked like he'd aged a decade. "I should have come home sooner." Luke didn't answer that. Instead, he gestured toward the exam room. "She'll want to see you when she wakes up. You staying in town?" "As long as it takes." From down the hall, a low, painful whine echoed. It sent shivers down Luke's spine. Ranger. He walked quickly to the recovery room, where the German shepherd lay half-sedated, hooked to a transfusion line. Deputy Carla Monroe stood at the doorway, arms crossed, expression hard. "He lost a lot of blood," she said. "We barely found a donor match." The vet tech's still checking for internal injuries. Luke stared at the dog. Even unconscious, his chest rose and fell, shallow but steady. Carla stepped closer. "You sure you recognize him?" Luke nodded. "That's Ranger, no doubt. But he was retired. Transferred out after his handler, what was his name? Gabe Holloway?" Luke's jaw tensed. "Yeah, Gabe. After Gabe was killed, they said the dog had PTSD. Wasn't fit for service. Got rehomed. Apparently he never left town. Or someone brought him back." They both looked at the dog in silence. "I pulled his old file," Carla said. "He was part of the meth task force. Last bust he was involved in ended in a hostage standoff. Saved a toddler. Took shrapnel. Gabe died 3 days later." Luke closed his eyes. He remembered it too well. He wouldn't stop whining in the kennel after that, Luke murmured. Laid in Gabe's locker, wouldn't eat. Dogs remember, Carla said softly. Even the parts we wish they'd forget. Just then, a nurse burst into the room. Sheriff, you need to come see this. They followed her down the hall to a small side office where someone had turned on the local AM station. You're just tuning in. Reports from the sheriff's office tonight are nothing short of extraordinary. A blood-covered German shepherd reportedly carried a baby through a snowstorm to safety. That's right. The dog, possibly a retired canine, is being called a hero by some. But where is the baby's mother? Is there more to this story? This is KBLR, Pine Bluff's voice in the storm. Stay tuned. Carla shut off the radio. Half the town's already speculating, she said, and I got calls from 2 reporters on my personal line. Luke rubbed his temples. Let them talk, he said. We've got real work to do. Outside, snow slammed against the windows like fists. The storm was nowhere near done. Carla leaned in. Sir, there's something else. He looked at her, expecting more bad news. I spoke to Dwayne. She meant Animal Control Officer Dwayne Mercer, a rules and regs man to the core. He wants to impound the dog, says protocol requires it during any open investigation involving a minor and an animal. Luke's face went cold. That dog saved that baby's life. Carla sighed. I know, I told him that, but if someone pushes hard enough, it won't matter. There was a long silence. Then Luke said, Let them try. She looked at him, surprised, but she didn't argue. In the silence that followed, Ranger let out another whimper. Luke turned back to the window, watching the snow pile up. Sarah Whitman was still out there, and Pine Bluff didn't have time for politics. It was nearly 3 a.m. when the emergency generator gave a final cough, and the hallway lights dimmed again. A nurse adjusted Harper's oxygen as the wind howled outside like a living thing. Sheriff Luke stood beside the hospital window, coffee going cold in his hand, his eyes unfocused. You ever wonder, he said quietly, why a dog like that would risk its life? To carry someone else's child? Carla looked up from her seat. You think it's more than instinct? Luke didn't answer right away. I think Ranger's seen things most people wouldn't believe. Gabe used to tell me that dog had a 6th sense for danger, like he could smell violence before it happened. Carla raised an eyebrow. Dogs don't think in motives, Luke. No, Luke agreed. But they feel loyalty, pain, fear, same as we do. They just don't lie about it. There was a beat of silence before Carla said, You want the truth, Sheriff. This thing's bigger than a house fire and a missing mom. I can feel it. Luke finally turned toward her. Then let's start digging. The county hospital had an old archive room in the basement, long since digitized but still filled with the smell of mildew, paper, and secrets. Luke and Carla stood over a cardboard file box labeled K9 Gabe Holloway. Inside were photos, Gabe and Ranger during their final case. One in particular stood out, a grainy shot from a crime scene. A house on the edge of town, windows boarded up, children's toys on the porch. Blood on the grass. This was the Blake property, Luke said. Gabe's last bust. Meth cookers were using the kids as shields. Gabe went in anyway. Ranger pulled out a kid and took a bullet in the hip. Gabe didn't make it, Carla added, voice low. And after that, Ranger snapped, refused food, became aggressive. Was labeled unstable and transferred out of active duty. Luke nodded slowly. But if Ranger ended up with Sarah, she never told us. Carla pulled a folder from the box. Animal rehoming record. Looks like, adopted out under a false name. Who signed it? Carla narrowed her eyes. Sam Holloway. Luke froze. Gabe's brother. Back upstairs, Harper began to stir. Her tiny fists clenched and unclenched. A faint moan escaped her lips. Sam Whitman rushed to her side. "Harper! Baby girl, I'm here!" The child blinked up at him, eyes glassy but aware. Dr. Halberd entered behind him. "She's coming around." "Reflexes look good. She'll be okay." Sam wiped his face with a sleeve. "Any word on Sarah?" Luke hesitated. "Not yet, but we're not giving up." Sam looked down at Harper, then at Luke. "I've been gone too long. I should have come back when she first called. She told me someone was watching her. I didn't listen." "Who was watching her?" "She didn't say. Just someone from her past. Someone angry." Luke's stomach sank. "Did she mention a name?" "No. But she was scared, Luke. Real scared." An hour later, Carla returned from her patrol car, face pale. "You need to hear this," she said, holding up her phone. She played a voicemail, a crackling male voice, low and shaking. "You think she's safe? You think the dog fixed it?" "She's not done running, and I'm not done looking." There was a long pause, then a whisper. "Old Mine Road. She's there, but not for long." Then the line went dead. Luke stood still, processing every word. Ranger, still barely conscious in the recovery kennel, suddenly barked once, weak but urgent. His ears twitched. His tail thumped. He knew that voice, and Luke. He did too. It was from a case buried deep in the past. A man who should have been in prison. "Call in backup," Luke said. Carla nodded, but Luke didn't wait. He headed straight to the armory. "Where are you going?" Sam asked. Luke didn't even slow down. "To find your sister. But the roads are blocked. Then we walk." As he opened the side door to the snow-choked street, Ranger limped toward him. "I didn't say you could come," Luke muttered. Ranger looked up, unblinking. Then took another step, and another. In the distance, storm clouds cracked with lightning. The blizzard wasn't over, but neither was the story. By morning, the blizzard had softened into a whisper, coating the town in a layer of cold silence. Elk Ridge looked like a snow globe no one dared shake. Quiet, suspended, waiting. Sheriff Luke Garvey hadn't slept. He sat in the passenger seat of Deputy Carla's cruiser as they pulled up to the Elk Ridge Community Center, now transformed into a temporary emergency shelter. Cots lined the basketball court. Thermoses of lukewarm coffee, thick blankets, and tired faces filled the space. And rumors, those filled the cracks like wind under a door. People turned when Luke stepped inside, and whispers followed. "There he is, the sheriff. That dog. They say it dragged the baby through the storm. I heard the mother left the child alone. They're saying she's dead." Luke hated this part. The waiting, the wondering, the judging. Towns this small didn't keep secrets long, but sometimes they told the wrong story first. Pastor Dan met him near the food table, holding a paper cup that steamed in the dim light. His voice, like always, was gentle and solid as old oak. "You look like you haven't slept since Nam." Luke gave him half a smile. "I probably haven't." "How's the baby?" "She's awake, breathing, but quiet." "And the mother?" Luke shook his head. "Still missing, but I've got leads." Dan nodded, then leaned in. "I don't trust leads in storms like this, but I trust dogs, and I trust you, Luke." Luke didn't reply. He didn't trust himself right now, not with the town looking for someone to blame and someone else to praise. Both felt premature. Mrs. Eloise Tanner, 82, sharp as the north wind, shuffled forward from her cot, wrapped in a crocheted shawl. Her eyes met Luke's with fire behind them. "That baby girl," she said. "Ain't nobody's fault but that world out there." "And that mother of hers?" Sarah Whitman was a good girl. I held her when she was 5 and her daddy put a bottle through the window. She's fought for everything she's ever had. Luke nodded slowly. I know, Mrs. Tanner. I don't think you do, she said sharply. People think quiet means weak, but Sarah, she's mountain strong. If she's out there, she's fighting her way back. Behind them, Carla approached with a man in a blue jacket that read County Animal Services across the back. He walked with a clipboard, his jaw clenched like it was used to chewing rules. Sheriff Garvey? He asked. I'm Officer Dwayne Keller, Animal Control. Hear about the K-9 brought in last night. Luke's shoulders stiffened. Ranger? Yes. The dog is not legally registered. He's a retired service animal, likely adopted under false pretense, and he's injured. By protocol, he should be transported for behavioral assessment and— No, Luke said, voice calm but cold. He stays. With respect, Sheriff, you don't have the authority. I have a county full of folks sleeping in gymnasiums, a missing woman, and a baby girl that dog saved with his own blood. You want to take him? You better bring backup. Dwayne looked at him, then around, eyes landing on Pastor Dan, Mrs. Eloise, and a dozen others who'd heard every word. He backed down, but not completely. I'll file a report. This isn't over. As Dwayne walked away, Carla leaned close. You know he's not wrong, right? I know he's not right, Luke said. That's good enough for me today. By noon, the story had hit local radio. Blood-covered dog saves infant in Montana blizzard. Then the call-in started. One woman claimed she'd seen Ranger before, helping during a car crash on Highway 7. Another swore he'd saved her grandson from a bear 10 years ago. But the question on everyone's lips wasn't about the dog. It was about Sarah. Where was she, and why had she left the baby alone? Back at the sheriff's office, Luke and Carla pored over the fire damage report. The pine tree had been dead inside, rotted from disease, but it fell precisely through the nursery window. Too precise, too. Accident? Carla asked. Coincidence? Luke returned. Neither feels right. That's when Ranger stood up in his kennel, shaky but alert. He pawed the bars, then sat back, growling low. Luke stepped closer. What is it, boy? Ranger's nose flared. Then, like a switch had flipped, he sat, ears forward. Carla blinked. He's remembering something. Luke opened the kennel door. Let's see where his memory takes us. The walk was slow. Ranger's limp was deep now, but his resolve was steel. He led them to the edge of town, past the snowbanks, past the grain silos, to a quiet trail behind the Whitman property, half buried in snow. That's where they found the tracks. Boots. Heavy, not Sarah's size, and then tire marks. Faded, but visible. Someone was watching her, Luke whispered. Carla's voice dropped. Someone who knew the tree would fall. Someone who wanted the baby left alone. Luke looked at Ranger. The old dog sat still, nose to the wind. Then he howled, a long, low note that rolled over the valley like a war song. Back at the shelter that night, someone taped a sign to the bulletin board. Save Ranger. Heroes don't belong in cages. Underneath it, people began signing their names, even Dwayne. And in the stillness of that frozen town, something stirred. Not fear, not blame, but memory. Because a town that doesn't forget also doesn't forgive the truth too late, especially not when it comes wearing fur and carrying a baby through fire. Later that night, under the flickering light of the sheriff's office, Luke sat with his boots on the desk, a legal pad in his lap. He was jotting down timelines, names, theories, but his eyes kept drifting to the blanket Ranger lay on. The old dog's breathing had slowed. His chest rose and fell like the ticking of a grandfather clock. steady, inevitable. Carla walked in with 2 steaming mugs. "No updates from SAR," she said. "The roads are still blocked near the east side." "Snow's frozen over everything." Luke took the coffee. "She's not on the roads." "What do you mean?" "She's smarter than that. If she had to run, she'd go high." "Back trails. Maybe the old logging paths." Carla sighed. "And you think the guy who tried to grab the baby might have gone after her?" Luke looked at her. "I think that man's still out there. I think Sarah knew he was coming before the storm even hit." Just then, the office phone rang. An old landline that rarely got used. Luke picked up. "Sheriff's office." There was a pause. Then a voice, raspy, male, urgent but shaky. "She's alive," the voice said. "Near Ridgewood Pass. She's hurt. She's trapped near the old mine road." Click. Luke stared at the receiver for a second too long. Then he stood up. Carla looked at him. "You recognize the voice?" Luke didn't answer directly. "Ranger did?" The dog had risen during the call, ears forward, head tilted. "I'm going out there," Luke said, already grabbing his coat. Carla blocked the door. "Are you insane? Ridgewood Pass is under 6 feet of snow. No plows." "No radio." He looked her in the eyes. "I'm not asking you to come." "I know," she said. "I'm coming anyway." They didn't go in cruisers. Sam Whitman, Sarah's brother, met them outside with his military snowmobile. "This thing ran through sandstorms and mountains in Afghanistan," he said. "You think a Montana blizzard's gonna stop it?" Luke smiled. "You still like breaking rules, huh?" Sam nodded. "Runs in the family." Ranger climbed into the back of the sled like he'd done it 100 times. His body was stiff, but his eyes were alive again. "I don't understand this dog," Sam muttered. "He doesn't act like he's just saving someone. It's like he's trying to finish something." Luke didn't explain. But he knew. Ranger wasn't just a hero tonight. He was atoning for something older. Something broken. A memory he never got to heal. At the edge of the pass, headlights cut through the white haze. The wind screamed like it was warning them off, but Ranger barked once, loud, clear, defiant. Luke gritted his teeth. "Let's go." They moved slowly, every step forward a fight. Carla held the tracker. Sam cleared the path. Ranger limped ahead, driven by something beyond instinct, something closer to duty. Or love. And then Ranger stopped. He turned sharply and ran toward a blackened pine stump. Beneath it, barely visible under a sheet of snow and fallen beams, "Sarah!" Sam shouted, dropping to his knees. Her body was curled, lips blue, face scraped and bruised, but her eyes fluttered open. "Harper," she rasped. "She's safe," Luke whispered, wrapping her in his coat. "She's safe because of him." Ranger nudged her hand gently, and for a moment, just a moment, Sarah smiled. Then the snow cracked behind them, voices, footsteps. A figure appeared through the trees. It wasn't rescue. It was the man Ranger had fought in the trailer. A shadow from her past, and he had a gun. The snowstorm hadn't let up. It screamed like a living thing, slashing at the faces of those who dared push into its frozen heart. Sheriff Luke stood between Sarah's half-conscious body and the man stepping out from the shadows. The stranger's figure was hulking, a ski mask over his face, and in his gloved hand, a silver pistol aimed with shaking fury. "Step away from her!" the man snarled, breath fogging in the air. Ranger growled low and primal. Luke didn't flinch. "Put it down," Luke said, steady. "We've got a dozen people back on the ridge and more coming. You shoot now, you'll never make it out of here." "You think I care about that?" the man spat. "She ruined my life, testified, put me in a cage like an animal." Sam shifted, eyes locked on the gunman. That's where you belong. The man turned sharply, just enough for Ranger to launch. He sprang with surprising speed for his age, teeth catching the man's wrist. The pistol went off, once, wildly into the trees, then clattered into the snow. Sam dove, tackling the man full force. The struggle was brutal but brief. Carla appeared moments later with a backup unit, cuffs out, rifle slung across her shoulder. She zip-tied the man's hands behind his back as he screamed about revenge, justice, and how he'd been set up. "You've been out of prison for 3 months," Carla growled. "And the first thing you do is stalk the woman who helped put you away?" The man just laughed. Luke crouched beside Ranger. The dog's side was bleeding again. He was panting hard. "Hang in there, old boy," Luke whispered. "You're not done yet." By sunrise, the team was back at the shelter. The town hall, normally used for quilting meetups and Sunday choir practice, had been converted into an emergency command center. Sarah lay on a cot, warm now, an IV in her arm. She was lucid but quiet, numb. Harper had been brought in earlier, still asleep, bundled like a caterpillar in fleece. Luke sat beside her. "You don't have to talk," he said gently, "but if you want to, I'll listen." Sarah turned to him. Her lips trembled. "It started 3 weeks ago. I got a letter in the mailbox." "No return address, just one sentence. I know where you live now." "Why didn't you come to us?" Luke asked. "I was scared." "I thought maybe if I ignored it, it'd go away." But then the noises started, scratches at the door at night. Footsteps outside the trailer, my car tires slashed. I stopped going to work nights. She paused, looked at her baby. "I thought I was protecting Harper by staying quiet, but that night, I heard the roof groan. I knew the tree wasn't falling on its own. It wasn't the wind. He planned it. He was watching us." Carla had entered mid-story, leaning against the frame of the hall's swinging door. She didn't speak, just listened, eyes shadowed with guilt. Later, she approached Luke outside. "You were right," she said. He looked at her. "About what?" "About the dog, about Sarah." "About everything." Luke gave her a tired smile. "You don't survive in this job by being soft, Carla. But sometimes you survive by listening to the ones who can't speak." She looked down at Ranger, sleeping in a folded blanket beside the heater. "And what happens to him now?" Luke took a deep breath. "That depends on Dwayne." Animal Control Officer Dwayne arrived mid-morning with paperwork. "He's a liability," Dwayne said flatly. "Hero or not, he bit a man. He acted unsupervised." "This is protocol." "The man he bit tried to kill a baby," Carla snapped. "That's not the point." Luke stepped forward. "What is the point, Dwayne?" "That we follow rules even when they don't make sense? That we punish a dog for doing what we trained him to do?" "I'm following the law," Dwayne said. "Then maybe," Luke replied, "it's the law that's broken." A silence fell. Then Pastor Dan walked in, voice ringing across the hall. "I have something to say." Everyone turned. "I've started a petition," he said, "to keep Ranger in this community, with Sarah and Harper, over 200 signatures in less than 2 hours. If this town believes in justice, then justice doesn't come with a muzzle." A murmur of agreement spread through the room. Luke looked at Dwayne. "You gonna go against the town officer?" Dwayne hesitated. Then, muttering, he shoved the paperwork back into his bag and left. That evening, Ranger slept at the foot of Sarah's cot. Harper stirred, eyes blinking open. She saw him, grinned, and reached a tiny hand toward his ear. Sarah watched, tears running silently down her cheeks. "He didn't just save Harper," she whispered. "He saved me too." Luke stood beside her. "You both deserved a second chance," he said. Outside, the blizzard had finally died. Inside, something else had begun to thaw too. Later that night, the shelter grew quiet, save for the humming of old radiators and the creak of snow sliding off the roof. Luke stood alone near the large window, his fingers curled around a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. The weight of the day was pressing on his shoulders like the storm pressing on the roof. Behind him, Ranger stirred. The old dog whimpered in his sleep, paws twitching, running in dreams. Maybe chasing memories, or maybe fleeing them. Carla stepped up beside Luke, silent for a moment. "You ever think about retirement?" she asked softly. Luke smirked, not looking at her. "Every damn day." Then something like this happens. "You think Dwayne's gonna back off for good?" "Not likely. He'll come back with bigger forms, probably in triplicate." They shared a quiet laugh. Carla glanced over at Ranger. "Still can't believe he made it through that blizzard. Carried a baby on his back." "That's more than most humans could have done." "Yeah," Luke said, his voice low. "And now he's sleeping on a cold floor like nothing ever happened." He turned to Carla, more serious now. "I want you to keep an eye on Sarah and Harper. Even after this dies down, there's more to this than a crazy ex-con and a falling tree." Carla nodded. "You think this connects to that meth ring again?" "I think it never really stopped. I think this was personal." A beat passed. "Then we're gonna finish it," she said. Luke gave her a long look, then handed her a key. "What's this?" "My office. You'll need it more than I will soon." Carla blinked. "You serious?" Luke just walked away. Near dawn, Sarah stirred on her cot. Ranger, sensing her shift, rose and placed his head on the edge of her blanket. Her hand found his ear again. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for all the days I ignored you, for every moment I thought you were just a ghost dog next door. Turns out, you're more real than most people I know." Ranger didn't move, just kept watching her, soft and steady. The sun peeked through the storm clouds for the first time in days. Somewhere down the hallway, a fax machine whined, printing new documents. A case file slid out with a red stamp. Unsolved. And on the top corner, a name. Officer Brandon Fields, deceased. Luke stood by that machine, reading it. His jaw tightened. "This ain't over," he murmured. Not by a long shot. The wind was howling like a wounded beast, slamming into the patrol truck as if it were trying to push them off the mountain road. Sheriff Luke Garvey gripped the wheel tighter, his knuckles pale under the dashboard light. Beside him, Ranger, the battered, blood-stained German shepherd, whined softly, ears twitching, eyes locked on the frosted windshield as if he could feel where she was. In the back seat, Deputy Carla Monroe tapped nervously on her radio, trying once again to reach rescue dispatch. "No signal, just static," she muttered, shaking the device. Luke didn't respond. His jaw was clenched tight, every ounce of him focused. Somewhere out there, beneath snowdrifts, pine limbs, and memories too heavy to speak aloud, Sarah Whitman was either dying or already gone. They hit the edge of the tree line where the road curved sharply toward a ridge. Luke slowed the vehicle, headlights barely cutting through the white sheet falling from the sky. Then, suddenly, Ranger barked, twice. A sharp, broken sound that made everyone freeze. "He smells her," Sam Whitman said from the truck bed, where he rode huddled under a tarp. "That's the bark he gave when I came home from Afghanistan." "He knows." Luke stopped the truck. "Then we go on foot." "No backup?" Carla asked, already pulling on gloves. "Can't wait." "Every second's a coin flip." They dismounted. Ranger leapt out into the snow, landing hard on his front paws, sniffed the air once, then bolted. "Ranger, slow!" Carla called, but the dog didn't obey. Luke didn't hesitate. "Follow him." They trudged through snow past their knees, Ranger cutting a sharp path through the drifts. The terrain grew rough, narrow, and treacherous. Ice-coated rocks, fallen logs, barbed wire fences hidden beneath white powder. Then they saw it. Smoke. Black, oily plumes curling up into the snow-filled night. Just ahead, behind a row of leaning fir trees, a cabin, half collapsed, one side scorched and splintered. "Jesus," Carla whispered. "That's not just fire. That's chemical." Sam took the lead, weapon drawn. "Meth lab? Possibly. That would explain a lot," Luke said grimly. Ranger stopped at the threshold, growling. Then suddenly, he dashed inside. "Ranger!" Luke shouted and followed him in. Inside, the cabin was chaos. Charred furniture, shattered bottles, and the acrid stench of something cooked and deadly. But amidst the wreckage, they heard it. A cough. A whisper. "Harper!" Luke turned sharply, spotted her. Sarah. Half buried under broken ceiling beams, bleeding from a head wound, her lips blue but alive. "Get this off her!" he barked, and they sprang into action. As Sam and Luke lifted the beams, Carla checked vitals. "She's hypothermic and bleeding, but she's alive." Sarah blinked open her eyes, barely able to speak. "Harper. The dog." "She's safe," Luke said gently. "Ranger got her out." Tears froze on her lashes. Suddenly, crack! The sound of wood splitting behind them. A flaming beam collapsed across the back door. "The whole place is coming down," Carla said, voice rising. Then, footsteps. Not theirs. Other footsteps. Heavy. Creaking on the far side of the room, a shadow moved, tall, broad, wearing a ski mask and holding something long in one hand. Luke turned, gun up. "Hands where I can see them!" The figure didn't respond. Instead, he backed into the firelight. A shotgun glinted in his gloved hands. "You don't belong here," he growled. "Neither do you," Luke replied. "Drop the weapon." But the man turned to Sarah and raised the gun. Before anyone could react, a brown and black blur launched from the shadows. Ranger flew like a bullet, jaws locking onto the man's arm. The shotgun clattered to the floor as both of them went down in a tangled, violent heap. "Ranger!" Carla cried, stepping forward, but Luke held her back. "No, he's got it." The masked man howled in pain, fists flailing. He struck Ranger hard, once, twice, but the dog wouldn't let go. Finally, Carla stunned the man with a swift baton strike to the skull. He dropped cold. The cabin groaned again. "We move now!" Luke shouted. Sam lifted Sarah. Carla helped steady them as they moved out, flames licking the walls. Ranger, bloody but standing, limped behind them. The wind outside was brutal again, but nothing could rival the fire behind them. They got Sarah to the truck. Carla called for a medevac. Luke checked Ranger, his hands shaking. "You did it, boy," he whispered, stroking the shepherd's head. Ranger didn't wag his tail. He just rested his chin on the sheriff's lap, closed his eyes, and finally slept. The next few hours blurred together in a haze of flashing emergency lights, muffled radio chatter, and the howling wind that refused to die down. The blizzard had not relented. If anything, it had grown more vicious. But inside the warmth of the sheriff's Suburban, there was a fragile peace. Sarah lay unconscious across the back seat, her head on her brother Sam's lap, a foil blanket wrapped tightly around her trembling body. Her face was pale, but no longer fading. She was holding on. Carla drove, white-knuckled, eyes squinting through the barely visible road ahead. "ETA 20 minutes to the ER, she muttered. Sheriff Luke sat in the passenger seat with Ranger curled in a tight ball at his boots. The dog's side rose and fell shallowly. His fur was matted with dried blood, both his and the attacker's. Luke whispered, "Stay with me, Ranger. We're not done yet." There was a flicker of movement. Ranger's tail thumped once against the floor mat. just once. But it was enough. At Stillwater County Hospital, the ER buzzed to life when they stormed in. "Gunshot victim, female, mid-30s, smoke inhalation and hypothermia," Carla barked at the attending nurse. "And a dog," Luke added urgently. "He's a police K9, retired but critical, gashes along the rib cage, possible internal bleeding." A young intern blinked. "A police dog?" Luke didn't hesitate. "He saved the baby. He took down an armed man." "He goes in." Dr. Jim Halberd, the silver-haired ER chief, stepped in then. "Get the girl to trauma, too. And for the dog, bring him to the back. Same triage as military canines. We owe him that much." Sam stayed with Sarah, refusing to let go of her hand. "She kept whispering Harper's name," he murmured. That's all she thought about. Meanwhile, Luke stepped outside to take a call. Snow stung his face as he answered. "Sheriff Garvey," said the voice on the other end, tense and clear. "This is Agent Roan from the DEA. We've been monitoring activity up north. Your team just cracked open an active meth site likely connected to the Wilcox cartel." Luke's eyes narrowed. "That explains the lab. We've got a suspect in custody, unconscious. Protect that man. He may be linked to the murder of K9 handler Officer Jamie Brooks 4 years ago." Luke froze. Jamie Brooks had been Ranger's handler, and his death had never sat right. "What's your timeline?" Luke asked. "We're flying in. 12 hours. Luke hung up, heart pounding. Back inside, Sarah had been stabilized. Her eyes fluttered open as Sam stood over her. "Harper," she croaked. "She's safe," he whispered, tears streaming. "The dog, Ranger, he saved her. He saved you." Sarah's lips trembled. She began to sob. I thought I lost her." Luke stepped into the room quietly. "You didn't, and you're not losing him either." He nodded toward the hallway where Ranger lay on a soft blanket, an IV in his leg. A nurse had gently cleaned the blood from his muzzle. The German shepherd was resting, but alive. Sarah looked over at Ranger through the glass window. "He found me, in the snow. I remember the moment. I saw his face and knew I wasn't going to die." Luke cleared his throat. "There's something else you should know. That man in the cabin, he wasn't random. DEA suspects he was tied to the meth ring that killed Ranger's handler. Your testimony in the past might have made you a target." Sarah's eyes widened. "I testified in a drug case years ago. They told me the gang was gone. They weren't." "But you helped shine a light on them. That's courage." She leaned back, overcome with emotion. Later that night in the sheriff's office, Deputy Carla typed up the preliminary report. "I owe Ranger an apology," she said softly. "I thought he was just an old dog with a bloody past." Luke didn't look up. "He is. But he's also a hero." There was a knock on the door. It was Pastor Dan. "I brought coffee." "And a little good news." Luke raised an eyebrow. "Local station just aired the story. Phones haven't stopped ringing. People are sending blankets, baby food, even dog beds. There's talk of raising money to rebuild Sarah's home." Luke let out a slow breath. This town never forgets. By dawn, the snow had slowed. A pinkish hue spilled over the mountains. Luke walked down the hallway of the hospital to where Ranger slept. He crouched beside him, rubbing his ear gently. "You were never forgotten, boy. You're not just a K9. You're family." Ranger opened one eye, gave a quiet grunt, then nudged Luke's hand with his nose. Somewhere down the hall, baby Harper began to cry. The sound echoed like a promise. Luke smiled softly. "Guess that's our cue." The television inside the sheriff's office hadn't been turned off in hours. CNN, NBC, even local Channel 4 from Billings were now replaying the footage on a loop. The bloodied German shepherd limping into the sheriff's station, carrying a crying baby on his back like something out of an old Western legend. Except this wasn't fiction. This was Harper Whitman. This was Ranger. And this was real. Sheriff Luke Garvey leaned against the wall, arms crossed, jaw clenched, eyes red from a sleepless night. He wasn't watching the news. He was watching the town watching the news. Every time the footage aired, you could hear the small crowd gathered outside the office gasp. Some in awe, others in disbelief. There were murmurs of, "That dog's a hero. God bless him." And, from one local man, "Why do we treat animals better than some folks treat their own kids?" Inside the sheriff's office, a different kind of storm was unfolding. Sarah sat in a hospital bed at County General, hooked up to an IV, her voice shaking as she held her phone tightly. On the other end, Carla Monroe listened with her notepad open, but her pen frozen mid-air. "It wasn't an accident," Sarah said. Carla's eyes narrowed. "You're saying the tree, it was cut?" Sarah's voice broke. "I heard the crack before it fell. Someone had been out there." "Watching us?" Carla stared at the phone. "Do you know who?" There was a pause. Then came the name again. Rick Dobson. Carla's breath caught. "The same Dobson from Ranger's old unit?" Sarah nodded slowly through the screen. "He came to the diner last week, said he was just passing through." "But he knew too much. He mentioned Harper by name. I told him to leave." 2 days later, I started getting letters. "What kind of letters?" "Threats, warnings. Your testimony ruined a life." "Yours isn't worth much either." Her voice quivered. "I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to put Harper at risk." "I thought if I laid low." "You didn't lay low," Carla whispered. "You survived." And then she added, "Because of Ranger." The press conference was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then the floodgates opened. "Sheriff, can you confirm the dog's connection to the old Carver case? Is it true Ms. Whitman was a witness in a federal trial involving police corruption? Has the department reopened the meth investigation from 4 years ago? Did you know Dobson was back in the area?" Luke held up his hand. "I'll say this once," he said, firm and low. "Yes, we are reopening the case. Yes, Ranger was present the night Jake Carver died. And yes, someone tried to kill that woman and her child." Flashes lit the room like fireworks. Carla stepped beside him. "And no," she added, "we will not be turning over the dog. Ranger is in protective custody." "He's not a suspect. He's a damn hero." The room quieted. One reporter in the back asked gently, "Sheriff, what would have happened if Ranger hadn't come to the station?" Luke's eyes flicked up. "There would be 2 more names on the headstone." Later that night, in the warmth of the hospital recovery wing, Sarah finally held Harper again. The baby squealed with laughter, soft, high-pitched, free. Sarah cried so hard she shook. Her arms wrapped tightly around her daughter's small body, as if she could somehow push away the past by holding the future a little closer. Sheriff Luke stood at the window, watching in silence. Behind him, Carla reviewed files from the Dobson investigation. "This man knew how to disappear," she murmured. "Last known address was burned down. No credit cards, no phone bills, just P.O. boxes and silence. Ghosts don't use cell phones," Luke muttered. "But they leave echoes." He glanced down at Ranger, who lay curled up by the hospital bed. Harper reached out a hand, tiny fingers wrapping around one of Ranger's ears. The dog's tail thumped gently, even in his exhaustion. Sarah looked up. "He didn't just save her," she said. "He fought someone off." There was blood, but not just his. Luke's eyes sharpened. "Whose blood?" She hesitated. "I don't know." "He tackled someone. I heard a scream. I saw a shadow running." Then Ranger came for Harper. Carla stood. We need to test his fur, trace for human DNA. We might get a match. Luke looked down at Ranger, then at Sarah. This isn't over. Sarah nodded. But at least we're alive to fight. By morning, the results came in. The blood on Ranger? Not just his. A partial DNA match came back from a known felon database, Rick Dobson. Confirmed. He was in town. He was near Sarah's trailer the night of the fire. Carla stared at the report, hands trembling. He's not just some disgraced ex-cop. He's working with the same ring that killed Carver. Probably running it. Luke nodded. Which means Ranger didn't just survive a second attack. He ended it, Carla whispered. Outside the station, hundreds had gathered. They brought dog treats, handmade collars, even drawings from local school kids. One banner hung above the crowd. We don't forget our heroes, even the four-legged ones. Pastor Dan approached the sheriff. We'd like to hold a town vote to make Ranger an honorary officer again, and to make sure he stays with Sarah and Harper. Luke smiled. He already is, and he already does. Carla handed Luke a copy of the DNA report. The past has teeth, huh? Luke looked toward the horizon, where the snow had started melting. No, he said. The past had claws. Ranger lifted his head, and somewhere in the distance another storm began to fade. Sheriff Luke opened the old filing cabinet in the back of his office. Dust flew up like ash, settling gently on the shoulders of his uniform. He hadn't touched these files in years, not since Jake Carver died. Not since they buried what was left of Ranger's handler, and with him, the truth. But tonight, the truth had claws, and it was scratching at the front door. "Carla!" he called. "You need to see this." She came over, eyes scanning over documents, photos, and maps pinned together with faded paper clips. There was a picture of Rick Dobson, young, sharp-jawed, in full uniform. Another showed the meth cabin in the woods, now in ruins. And in one frame, a younger Ranger sat at attention beside Carver, both faces proud, unsuspecting. "These were the same woods we pulled Sarah from," Luke said. "Same area. Same tracks." Carla's jaw tightened. "You think Dobson never left?" "No," Luke muttered. "I think he hid here the whole time. Protected by fear, fueled by silence." She exhaled sharply. "And Ranger remembered it all." A beat passed. Then Luke added, "He didn't just bring us a baby that night. He brought us back to the beginning. At the hospital, Harper was fast asleep, curled in Sarah's arms. A small scar was visible on the baby's cheek now, barely a whisper of pink, but it reminded Sarah of everything that could have gone wrong. That did go wrong, and of everything Ranger made right. A soft knock on the door startled her. It was Pastor Dan, carrying something wrapped in cloth. He unwrapped it carefully. It was a wooden cross, carved by hand, with Ranger's name engraved along the bottom. "We wanted you to have this," he said, voice thick. "The town voted. Ranger belongs with you and Harper. Always." Sarah broke into tears. She had no words, only gratitude. Across town, outside the sheriff's office, Animal Control Officer Dwayne paced nervously. A leash dangled from his hand, unused. He hated this. He liked dogs. Hell, he respected Ranger. But protocol was protocol, and legally, the animal was still flagged as engaged in a violent incident. He knocked on Luke's door. "We need to talk about the dog," Dwayne said, not unkindly. "He can't stay unregistered." "Not if he's been involved in saving a baby? In stopping a criminal the system missed?" Luke's voice was calm but sharp. Dwayne sighed. "I'm not the enemy here, Sheriff. But the board wants a formal evaluation. They're giving you 72 hours to comply or surrender him." Luke nodded once. "Then I guess we've got 72 hours to remind them who this dog really is." He walked over to the window and watched the townspeople still gathered with signs, candles, and banners. One girl held a poster board that simply read, "Let Ranger Stay." Inside the sheriff's office, the flicker of a candle was the only light as Luke laid the final folder on the desk. It was labeled, "Carver. Incident Report, July 7th. Carla leaned in as he opened it. Inside were crime scene photos, burned beams, shell casings, and a blurry figure captured by a trail cam. But one image was crystal clear, a badge half buried in the snow, marked with blood, Carver's. "This," Luke said softly, "wasn't an ambush. It was a cover-up." Carla narrowed her eyes. "You mean someone inside?" Luke nodded grimly. "Carver filed a report implicating a fellow officer, Rick Dobson. 2 weeks later, he's dead, and Dobson disappears." Her voice dropped. "And you think Dobson came back?" "He never left." Carla stood silent, the weight of the years crashing over her like the snowstorm outside. Just then, a knock rattled the front door. It creaked open, revealing Sam Whitman, face pale, breath steaming. He was holding a tattered envelope. "I think this was meant for you," he said. Inside was a hand-drawn map and a confession. In shaking handwriting it read, "Ranger tried to stop me. He knew. He always knew. But the higher-ups wanted silence. I didn't want to kill Carver. They made me. I'm sorry. If this is found, I'm already gone. Signed, R.D." Sam looked up. "I found this in the cabin, under floorboards. Dobson's handwriting matches the files." Luke stood still for a moment. "Then, get this to the DA, tonight." He turned to Carla. "You're going to finish what we couldn't. You're going to clean this department up, for good." Carla nodded. Her voice trembled. "And Ranger?" Luke smiled for the first time in hours. "He's already done his part. Now it's our turn." Back at the hospital, Harper stirred in her crib. Ranger sat at the foot of her bed, bandaged and weak, but alert. His ears perked when Sarah approached, holding a small leather collar. "It's yours," she whispered. "You earned it. Again." She fastened the tag around his neck. It read, "Ranger, hero, guardian, family." He leaned into her touch. For the first time in years, the old dog closed his eyes and slept without nightmares. Outside the window, the snow finally stopped. The morning sun fought to break through the heavy gray clouds as Sheriff Luke Garvey stared down at the growing pile of paperwork on his desk. News vans had descended on the town like vultures, sensing a storm had passed and left a story behind. And they were right, just not the one they thought they knew. Outside, the steps of the sheriff's office were lined with candles, teddy bears, and hand-drawn notes from local school children. "Thank you, Ranger. Hero dog. Our guardian angel." It had only been 3 days since Ranger had led the team to Sarah in the old mine cabin and saved both her and Harper. But in the minds of the townsfolk, he was already a legend. The problem was, legends didn't sit well with Officer Duane. "No exceptions, Luke," Duane said flatly, standing in the sheriff's doorway with his arms crossed. "The animal was off-leash, involved in a potentially dangerous rescue and attacked a human. We don't know the full story yet." Luke leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temple. "That human was trying to kidnap a baby and burn a witness alive. Ranger didn't attack anyone. He intervened." "Like the law says he should." Duane shook his head. "The law says nothing about retired canines acting independently. He's not under anyone's control. He's a liability." At that moment, as if summoned by instinct, Ranger padded into the office, his movements slow but purposeful. A bandage wrapped around his flank. He sat next to Luke's chair, eyes calm and unwavering as if he understood every word. Duane glanced down, then looked away. "Evaluation's in 2 days. I'll be back then." Dwayne said quietly before stepping out. Luke looked at Ranger. He doesn't get it, but we'll make sure the town does. Across town at the community center, Pastor Dan stood in front of a makeshift podium. The place was packed. Farmers in flannel, teenagers with phones held up for live streams, elderly women wiping away tears. Sarah sat near the front, still pale, one arm in a sling, Harper sleeping in her lap. Carla stood to one side, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. "I've lived in this town for over 60 years, Pastor Dan began, voice steady and warm, "and I've seen folks rally around a barn fire, a broken family, and a lost child. But I've never seen us come together quite like this." He gestured behind him to a projection screen that showed the grainy security footage of Ranger bursting through the sheriff's office doors, Harper strapped across his back. Gasps and sniffles filled the room. Pastor Dan continued, "This is a dog who served, who protected. And when everyone else couldn't reach that baby, he went, through snow and blood and fear. Tell me what law should take him away from the family he just saved?" The crowd erupted in applause, a standing ovation forming before the pastor even stepped down. From the side, Sam Whitman, Sarah's estranged brother, approached the microphone. He wore his military jacket, the insignia faded, but the pride still intact. "I've served beside heroes," he said plainly. "Ranger's one of them. I may have left my sister years ago when she needed me, but I won't make that mistake again. And I won't let this town make a mistake either." His voice cracked, just slightly. And that was enough. The room shifted from sympathy to unity. Later that night, Sarah stood outside the sheriff's office, her eyes scanning the twilight horizon. She clutched a small photograph, her and Harper, taken just days before the storm. Carla joined her, hands in her jacket pockets. "I was wrong," Carla said without prompting. Sarah blinked. "About what?" "About you. About him." She nodded toward the door where Ranger lay resting beside the desk inside. "I thought I'd seen everything, being a deputy. But this town still surprises me." Sarah smiled faintly. "It surprises me, too. I never thought I'd end up back here. And yet, I can't imagine being anywhere else now." Carla hesitated. "You're going to fight for him, right?" "If they try to take him." Sarah turned, her eyes steel. "He saved my daughter. I'd go to court." "I'd go to Congress if I had to." Carla smirked. "Then I guess you'll need a good witness." The county courthouse hadn't seen this many people since the last winter festival vote for best chili. But today, no one was here for chili. They were here for Ranger. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Wooden benches creaked under the weight of bodies and expectation. Reporters lined the back wall, their cameras humming silently, lenses trained on the dog lying quietly at the feet of Sarah Whitman. She sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by Sheriff Luke and Sam. Carla Monroe was in uniform beside them, arms crossed, staring daggers at the animal control attorney across the aisle. Judge Miriam Hawthorne entered, stern, gray-haired, known for her no-nonsense courtroom. She banged her gavel once. "This hearing will determine whether the dog known as Ranger remains in the custody of Ms. Sarah Whitman or is to be remanded for behavioral evaluation under state statute." "Begin." The animal control attorney stood, a man named Barnes. His suit was immaculate, his tone clinical. "This is not about emotion. It's about precedent. The dog in question, while noble in appearance, is not an active law enforcement canine. He's been involved in at least 2 unregulated rescue actions. He bit a human. He acted without command. We can't let sentiment set the law." Murmurs stirred in the courtroom. Judge Hawthorne glanced over her glasses. "Do you have any proof the bite was unjustified?" Barnes hesitated. "No direct footage, just aftermath." "The suspect is deceased, but—" "Thank you." she said dryly. Next. Sarah rose. She looked thinner, still pale, but when she spoke, her voice rang out strong. I was trapped under a collapsed cabin, she said. My baby was inside. No one could get to us. No one but him. She motioned to Ranger, who lay still, eyes watching her. That man you say he attacked? He came for my baby. He beat Ranger with a crowbar, and Ranger still dragged himself to save Harper and bring her through the snow to the sheriff's office. She paused. You want to evaluate him for aggression? Fine, but evaluate the whole truth, because the only thing he's guilty of is loyalty. The room broke into scattered applause. The judge raised her gavel but didn't strike it. Sheriff Luke stood next. He held up a manila folder. This is the final report from a reopened case file. Ranger's last mission. His handler, Officer Rick Hale, didn't die in a drug raid by accident. He was ambushed, set up by a crooked cop working with the meth ring. That same ring Sarah testified against. The same ring that tried to kill her. He dropped the folder onto the desk with a heavy thunk. That man Ranger bit. His fingerprints matched someone from that network, the same people Ranger was trained to track. That wasn't a random act of violence. It was instinct. Training? Justice? Gasps echoed. Carla stepped forward, surprising everyone. I'd like to formally request Ranger be granted official recognition as Service Dog Emeritus, she said. He's done more for this town than most of us in this room, and he's still protecting the people we swore to serve. Judge Hawthorne studied the room. Her gaze landed on Ranger. The room went silent. She finally spoke. Effective immediately, Ranger is to remain with Sarah Whitman and her daughter. He is hereby designated Service Dog Emeritus, protected under state law. This case is closed. Gavel. Applause. A child cried out, "We love you, Ranger!" That night, the town held a candlelight gathering under the stars. A stage had been set up in front of Town Hall. Pastor Dan gave a short prayer, his voice thick with emotion. Then Sarah stepped up, Harper in her arms, Ranger beside her. He didn't just save Harper, she said. He saved me too, from fear, from loneliness, from thinking no one would come. She looked down at the dog, gently stroked his graying fur. Some heroes wear badges, some wear fur. All of them deserve to be remembered. Ranger barked once, sharp, proud. Sam leaned over to Carla, who stood quietly beside him. You sticking around after this? Carla smirked. Depends if your sister lets me borrow her couch, he chuckled. Fair. You're earning your spot, deputy. She nudged him playfully. And you're earning your way back into her life. Fireflies danced in the warm evening air. Ranger stood, eyes fixed on Harper as she toddled toward him, her little hand reaching out to grab his ear. He didn't flinch. He only leaned in. As the crowd cheered, the town's mayor unveiled a statue made by the local high schoolers, a bronze rendering of Ranger Harper in a sling across his back. The inscription read, "To those who serve with paws and heart." The spring thaw in Elk Ridge was always a quiet miracle. Snow no longer howled through the narrow mountain passes, but melted in rivulets down worn paths and creaked off old rooftops. But even with blue skies above and grass finally peeking through the frozen soil, for the people of the town, and for Ranger, the weight of winter still lingered. Outside the sheriff's office, a makeshift sign leaned against the porch steps, half covered in slush and pine needles. It read, "Welcome home, Harper." Sheriff Luke Garvey stood at his office window, watching the small cluster of townsfolk putting up banners and planting fresh wildflowers. He still wore the badge, but only for a few more days. A new chapter was coming, not just for him, but for the whole town. And it all began with a single act of instinct, loyalty, and blood. Inside, Ranger lay curled on a patchwork rug in front of the wood stove. His eyes, milky now with age, remained locked on the front door. Any movement outside still triggered the lift of his ears, the subtle tension in his shoulder. His body had grown old, but his spirit. Unshaken, the door creaked open. Harper toddled inside on wobbly legs, arms outstretched. She was giggling, bundled in a tiny purple coat with mittens dangling from clips on her sleeves. Ranger tried to stand but groaned with stiffness. Instead, he settled for a tail thump on the floor. "Hi, boy," Harper squealed. "I brought you a cookie." Behind her, Sarah Whitman smiled as she carried a brown bag and a sketchbook tucked under her arm. Her bruises had faded. Her gait was stronger now, and her eyes, once heavy with exhaustion and fear, held something else today. Peace. Luke stepped back to give them space, watching as Harper knelt by Ranger and tried to feed him a piece of gingerbread shaped like a bone. Sarah leaned against the desk. "She insists he needs one every time we visit." Luke chuckled. "He's earned a dozen." Sarah paused, her smile fading a touch. "You okay, Sheriff?" Luke hesitated. "It's been a long winter, Sarah, for all of us." She nodded, setting the bag down and opening the sketchbook. Inside were drawings, charcoal portraits of Ranger, Harper, even Luke, but what caught his eye was the latest one, a large canvas rendition of the sheriff's office, with Ranger standing tall in front, snow swirling behind him, and Harper strapped to his back. "I want to hang it in the new community center," Sarah said. "For what he did, for what you all did." Luke looked down at the dog again. "Ranger did it. He always knew what mattered most." Sarah reached out, her hand grazing the worn fur behind Ranger's ears. "He saved more than just Harper. He brought this whole town together again." Just then, the door opened again, this time with more force. Carla Munro strode in, a badge now glinting on her chest. Her uniform was new, crisp, and beneath her arm she carried a manila folder. "You're early," Luke said. "Can't help it," Carla replied. "Being sheriff makes you punctual." Luke grinned. "Don't rub it in." Carla knelt beside Ranger. "Hey, partner, you ready for your big moment?" From the folder, she pulled a velvet case. Inside, a small silver medallion engraved with the town's seal and the words, "Service Dog Emeritus, Elk Ridge County." Ranger sniffed it, then rested his head on Harper's lap. "I figured," Carla said, brushing his ear. "Less medals, more cookies." A laugh echoed from the doorway. Sam Whitman stood with Pastor Dan, both of them holding wooden beams and planks. "House frame's going up fast," Sam said. "Folks from 4 counties showed up to help. Hell, even Dwayne showed up with his tool belt and 2 left feet." Luke raised a brow. "Dwayne helping build a home for a dog he tried to impound?" "Guess that's Ranger's magic," Sam smirked. Pastor Dan nodded. "It's not just a house anymore. It's a symbol. We're naming the street after him, Ranger's Way." Sarah's breath caught. She looked down at Ranger, who blinked slowly, as if he knew. Maybe he did. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You already did," Luke replied. "Every day you kept fighting. Every time you got back up." Harper suddenly stood up and shouted, "Come on, boy! Come walk!" Everyone quieted as Ranger rose, joints creaking, legs shaking, but he did stand. Slowly, he padded beside her, following the toddler's excited wobble toward the door. And just before stepping outside, he paused, turning his head to look at Luke, then Carla, then Sarah. It was a look that said everything without a single word. The spring morning air was crisp, but it no longer carried the bite of winter's wrath. Sunlight glinted off the new frame of the modest home rising from the ruins. Volunteers from across the county had pitched in, some even driving in from neighboring states after hearing Ranger's story on national news. Sheriff Luke stood at the edge of the plot, hands in his pockets, watching as Sam helped Sarah position a wooden beam. The sheriff had officially turned in his badge just 2 weeks prior, passing the reins to Carla. She was now the youngest sheriff in county history, and already proving herself more than worthy of the title. Ranger sat a few feet away in the grass, his muzzle now mostly gray, his left hind leg dragging slightly. The town vet had said he'd never fully recover from the injury sustained that night. But the old dog didn't seem to mind. His eyes tracked every movement Harper made as she waddled around in her pink overalls, her tiny hands gripping a plush toy that looked suspiciously like Ranger himself. A crowd began to gather near the clearing, forming a loose circle around a newly set stone monument. It was smooth granite, etched with precision. At the top, bold letters read, "To those who serve with paws and heart." Beneath it, a smaller inscription, "Ranger, Guardian, Warrior, Friend." Pastor Dan stepped forward, raising his voice just enough to cut through the ambient hum of the morning. "Today, we don't just dedicate a home. We honor a journey, one paved in loss, in courage, and above all in love. We don't always get second chances in life, but when we do, it's up to us to make them count." He gestured to Sarah, who carried Harper up to the front. Harper giggled, then let go of her toy and toddled toward Ranger. The old dog, as if rehearsed, met her halfway. The crowd held their breath as the little girl stumbled, paused, and then Ranger nudged her gently with his nose. She took another step, then another, and another. Cheers erupted. Cameras clicked, but Luke wasn't watching them. He was watching Ranger, his quiet sentinel, hold still as Harper climbed up to throw her arms around his neck. Nearby, Carla stood with Sam, her hand brushing his. She'd seen the worst this town had to offer. She doubted people, doubted herself. But now, as the sun warmed her face and the crowd embraced the moment, she allowed herself to believe in good again. Later that evening, as the town drifted into celebration, Luke wandered down a quiet trail behind the clearing. He paused at the tree line, looking back. Ranger limped over to him, sitting at his side. "You did good, boy," Luke whispered, resting a hand on his head. "Hell, you did better than any of us." Ranger didn't respond, of course, but he didn't need to. He just sat there beside him, the same way he had when the storm first hit. Silent, unmoving, loyal. As the stars blinked to life overhead, Sarah's voice echoed faintly from the house, telling Harper it was bedtime. And from the clearing, the townspeople began to drift home. But the monument remained, catching moonlight on its polished face. And the snow, well, a few flakes still clung to the edges of the woods, just enough to remind them that storms may come again, but so too would the ones who weather them with paws and heart. And now we want to hear from you. If this story touched your heart, just drop a simple 1 in the comments, or type 0 if Ranger reminded you of a dog you once loved. Your comment means more than you think. It helps us keep telling stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss the next powerful tale of animals and the humans they save. We have more coming. You won't want to miss them.